Recording started.
Hey everybody, I want to welcome you to this week's Matrexit Discussion Group Call for Tactical Sovereignty. This wonderful Sunday, the first day of the week, not the 7th, not the Sabbath, like I always say. And that's a whole rabbit hole people can go down there. But we're just kind of chit-chatting about some of the things that we experience in whatever you want to call this movement. You know, people getting out and doing research and trying to learn and see what works and what doesn't work. And there's always a benefit to that. But like I was saying, I think sometimes it kind of clogs up the workday of the people behind the scenes, whether it's UCC or whatever the case is, and that gets frustrating for them. And so they would just as soon maybe fry some people now and then and kind of slow down the amount of work or effort that they've got to put forward on the backside. I think you mentioned John, Heather Tucci and Divine and some of those people.
Oh yeah. Yep, they've been around for years, these guys, and I don't know, their students are not happy. Let's just say it that way.
Well, and people now, especially, they're setting up like Telegram groups and things like that. And when I see a Telegram group that has in excess of over 200,000 people commenting on it, or at least over 200,000 comments over a fairly short span of time, but you're not seeing people come forward with success stories, that kind of makes you start to question things a little bit.
Yeah. Chris Hauser group. He's never shown any proof of what he's doing.
Yeah, one of the things I don't really comprehend, if you're claiming going out and being able to get a car or house or, you know, whatever the case may be, why don't you splash around some pictures of these fancy cars or whatever you're getting, or even the not so fancy ones? Yeah. You know, even if you're just blowing smoke up everybody's tail, then, I mean, you could even just go to a parking lot and take a picture of an anonymous car if you want and post it, you know? Yeah. But they're not even that creative.
Nope.
So anyway, John, you normally contact me with a plethora of different topics to go over and talk about. What do you have this evening? Anything?
Well, I mean, we can just talk a little bit about, you know, how students are struggling and how the only real coach is you. You could learn yourself. I mean, you need some pointers, but when you start relying on other people to give you every single thing, it should be obvious that it's not going to happen. I mean, anything serious in life, you got to learn how to do yourself. You know, no one's going to teach you how to be married or how to drive a car. Well, they will teach you a little about the car, but I mean, you know, you still got to learn on your own. You know, so these teachers have got to we got to sweep these people aside. We got to start doing more of our own nuts and bolts ourselves. Get those law books. I have Anderson, I have Ballantyne's. Those are really helpful. Good places to start. You know, learn the words, all the secrets of the words. How are they talking to you? You know, just some basic pointers.
Yeah, I've started to try and clean up a lot of that kind of stuff from coming into the group Tactical Sovereignty on Facebook, because I'll say, well, Chris Rice, I've been on his YouTube channel a couple of times, and he interviews a number of various people that are doing or attempting to do different things within, or whether you want to call it the truth movement or whatever. And I won't say which it was, but he posted something a couple days ago that, you know, hey, I like Chris and everything, but the one interview that he did with somebody, it was almost an hour and a half long. I said, well, I know what that guy's about. Let me see if he's talking about anything new, if he's found anything new. So I went and I didn't make it really even 10, 15 minutes into the conversation and said, no, I've got to deny this post from going into tactical. because I just fear that people that see things posted in tactical, no matter what stage of the process of learning they're at, they're going to have an assumption that this is valuable information and that this is a lot of truth right here. And this guy covered, didn't mean to say guy, I don't want to give any ideas who it is, but he covered things basically from the inception, the beginning of the United States of America to the present day. And 90% of what he had to say was false.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it frustrating when somebody, and like I said, I like Chris Rice, like his channel and everything, but whether you're just putting things out for getting viewers or whatever the case may be, when you have somebody on multiple times and you can't back check their info, I have an issue with that because there's a lot of people that put out a lot of claims, but they never show any evidence of any of it.
Mm.
Now, that particular episode, the guy did go and show some sources for different things, but they were kind of basic things that a lot of us already know. But all of these like outlandish claims that were being made, and coming off as being an educated teacher or whatever, those things, there weren't any resources for that. There was no research material to double check, or this is where I found it at, or anything like that. And so when people do that kind of thing, I find that very, very frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
And the sad thing is that the majority of the people listening to them are people that don't have a lot of knowledge or expertise in those topics either. So they just automatically presume that this individual knows what they're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and that can be dangerous. And especially, there's been more than one occasion where some of these people that you may see on Crow 777 or other platforms, there's been numerous times where people very, very, very close to them, I end up spending hours with them trying to undo what that guru or whoever they were with, undo the mess that they got them into.
Right.
Because even the people close to them just presume that they know exactly what they're talking about. They like them on a personal level, have whatever kind of relationship with them, so they just presume that these people are factual and on target. And sadly, more often than not, these people are far, far off topic or off target, either or.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or half the time they're recycling, standard theory and putting a twist on it, but you can probably detect, where the BS comes in. I know I can. If someone says Ben Franklin was a true American, well, I know that's BS because he was an agent in transaction. He was an agent for the crown. That can be researched. He lived there. I mean, for 25 years during the war and all that. I mean, so there's some things you can do the work. You can check some things out. But there's a lot people say, Brian, you cannot check out. And that's what I don't like.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And I would say Ben Franklin actually is an easy one. I think it's funny when you go back and look at the past few years with all the allegations made at the previous CEO of US Inc. and claims that he was in bed with the Russians or any of that kind of stuff. And then I look at Ben Franklin, who his fingerprint, his signature is on all of the organic documents for the United States. He signed everything that was done. He's the only one that did. His signature is all over everything. But he spent most of his time overseas. He spent more time overseas than he spent in the United States of America, whether he was at England or France. He spent more time with those people than he spent here with the rest of the founders. And if to me, if that doesn't scream double agent to you, I don't know what would.
Right.
On top of the fact, he was never a citizen of the United States of America, as were seven of the first eight CEOs or seven of the first eight presidents for the United States. They were never citizens.
They were British subjects, right?
Yeah, they were born British subjects. Even if they were born here, I saw a claim on one that was born in New York, but you look at the date that they were born here, and I'm sorry, this territory was called British North America at that time.
Yeah.
So if you're born on a territory called British North America, that would make you a British subject.
Right. So that means John Locke wrote for us back in the 1600s, not just for England.
Right. Yeah, and John Locke, I find John Locke a very fascinating writer. People go and read some of the things that he wrote, especially regarding slavery. He gets into the depth of where we are at today and the type of slavery we're talking about. He gets into, even his spiritual beliefs that you are a product of the Creator. You belong to the Creator. And so if you belong to the Creator, this is what he attests, is that since you belong to the Creator, do you even have the right to give yourself over to voluntary servitude of another entity? And his claim is no, you don't have that right because your body does not belong to you. It was gifted to you by God.
Wow.
I found that concept pretty fascinating myself. Something to make you stop and think a little bit about.
Mm-hmm.
But that all really depends on where your belief system is at, I guess.
Well, that's what the next system was. Well, belief now. That's where the fiction begins. It's not it's not the true God. It's not, that we're made of minerals. We're now just a piece of paper, or we're pledging to Papa or to the Queen or whoever. That was the beginning of it in the 1700s. All the fiction. Remember, they need fiction first, Brian. Then they can say we're at war. then they can say we're in debt.
Yeah.
But the biggie is fiction. And then Brent Franklin and all that is just setting all this up, I think, for the cartel, whoever's back in Europe.
Yeah, he was just putting all the tools and resources in place to come forward with the ultimate goal, which is where we've landed at today. And I'm sorry, regardless what different people might think, I would say the position that people find themselves in now, Ben Franklin would be very happy about.
Oh yeah. So would Alexander Hamilton. He would love the centralized systems, right? Like the Fed.
Yeah, well, more than likely. Was it Hamilton? Which president was it actually, though, that got rid of the U.S. debt? The only time it's ever been totally paid off to foreign creditors.
Probably Jackson.
Yeah, there you go. That was Jackson, not Hamilton. Andrew Jackson. So if a president wants to emulate anybody, they should emulate Jackson.
Yeah, but even he was like just protecting the wildcatters back here. mean, he's not totally clean either. I mean, no president's clean. That one I came across too in my research. Although Hoover was pretty good, but you never know. It's just you're just
Yeah,
doing what you're told.
I don't think anybody can attain to that position without having some skeletons in the closet.
Yeah.
And different people might have their favorite president or whoever the case may be, but I'm sorry, evil is still evil. It doesn't matter what level of evil it is. Evil is still evil.
Right.
Is someone who only murdered one person more shameless than somebody who's murdered 1,000?
Hmm.
If you commit murder, what are you called the rest of your life?
Ex-murderer?
Yeah, ex-murderer. Hey, you're referred to as a murderer, right?
Right.
Doesn't matter the amount. Well, have you ever lied in your life? There's something to think about.
Hmm. That is a good thought, yeah.
Well, we lie down every day.
All right. So everyone is a liar, especially at 3:30 in the morning. But that gets into the whole twist and play on words that they like to do. I was talking to a friend this evening about education, and I think this is really where a lot of the faults lie at, is within the education system, and that the majority, well, not the majority, I would say just about everybody is not given the skill set that they need with the education system. And to understand why would be, well, whoever's in charge of the educational system does not think that some of these things would benefit their desired outcome for the world or for the country or state, whatever the case may be. Because there's certain things that they could arm people with that would greatly benefit people. And I think one of those things to me is very obvious, but I never ever hear anyone, not even educators, talk about it. You want to take a guess as to what that would be?
Common sense.
Well, common sense should come along with the rest of your education. I think the most important thing that everyone should start learning in school from the youngest age possible is topics on psychology. And I'll name a big one right off the get here. I would say an obvious one would be arming people with the tools to realize what narcissism is.
Good question.
Because
with all the in today's world.
Because the whole system as it exists is completely narcissistic. It knows what's best for you. You need it. You can't do anything without it.
Right.
The system is smarter than you. But the system will also congratulate you only when it needs something, only when you're following the protocol that it wants you to follow. And I think a lot of people could save themselves from some very disastrous relationships in life if they were able to identify narcissistic traits. Because once you know what it is, I mean, you hear it come out of the mouths of narcissists immediately. You start recognizing exactly what they're doing and that they're plotting something.
Yep.
Wouldn't that just go along with learning boundaries?
You mean like emotional boundaries?
Yes.
Yeah, everybody should know their boundaries. And they should realize, like, I said before, like takers. I mean, this could be another little lesson in psychology that people could be taught, is to be able to identify people who are takers, because takers never put a limit on how much they're going to take. They have no limits. So therefore, we should all put limits on how much we're going to give, because the takers don't have limits. A lot of times, different relationships we're in, you look back on them a year or two later, and you're like, gosh, I was there for them when they moved. I helped them. I helped them fix a car. I helped them with transportation. I mean, you just go down through the laundry list. Oh, they needed $50 here. They needed $20 there. And you stop and think, okay, I see a whole bunch of taking happening. But, the one time you go and ask them to help you out with something simple or minute, they're not there. All of a sudden, they can't be there for you, when you've been there for them step by step along the way through life, continuously, without hesitation. Yeah, these are little things that should be taught to people in school. How relationships work. That there's actually a give and take in relationships. A quid pro quo. They're not one-sided. And to look at, the macro level, look at the bigger picture of takers. Okay, how about somebody that is going to take from you in the form of tax of your labor, and then they're also going to take from you in that same form whenever you use any of the products of your labor, if you use any of the money. Anytime you use the product, you're also getting taxed again. And even if you sell something that you paid a tax on when you purchased it, once again, you go and sell it, what are they doing? They're taking from you again. They're taxing you again. Take, 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 take. I'm sure that's one of the obvious ones for a lot of people.
And they take your time too, Brian.
Yeah. How much time? Your time is your most valuable commodity. How much of your time has been consumed by them as well? Even if you go to pay some of those regular taxes, or say even something as simple as a ticket. Well, if it's a busy place, you've got to go in and take a number and sit and wait on them for them to accept they're taking.
Yep.
That'd be a double take there. Both your time and energy and your resources, your funds.
See, with school, we're giving them our brain for 6 hours a day. And then let's say we join the service. We're now giving the Army our body for 4 years. And then, of course, those don't come back in the same way they left. We're giving up all of our energy to this Cyclops.
Yeah, they're never returned in the same or better shape that they were in when they were first given over. And even, you mentioned education. You are automatically programmed when you go in for your education that you obviously don't know anything, so you need to sit there as an empty vessel and just accept and believe everything that's handed to you. That myself, fortunately, I never went to a public school, but even going to a private school, I don't ever recall hearing a teacher say, Stop. Listen. Whatever I tell you, I don't want you to believe it 100%. I want you to go and back check the information that I provide to you. I want you to make sure that what I'm saying is 100% correct and learn about these topics on your own. I don't ever remember hearing a teacher say that. They just go and spew all this info to you, and you're expected to automatically assume it to be true and correct, and never encouraged to go and do a back check on it. Go and do your own research on the topic. See how on point or on target they were. That is something that never happens in schooling. Not that I ever witnessed.
Right. They teach what to think, not how to think.
And that's it right there. And nobody's taught how to really think, how to really weigh things out. The elements of a situation that you need to look at to be able to determine whether it's factual or not. And, I mean, here's the kicker. People continue on in life generally with that same kind of idea, where when they come across a new topic, they automatically soak it up and they accept it to be true without going and doing any fact checking on it itself.
I mean, just look at some of the words. I mean, the word school, Brian, means scheme.
Yeah.
Right? It's not the first definition, but if you keep looking, same thing with tuition. You know what that means? Jail or control.
Yeah, it's a form of punishment.
Well, yeah. I mean, kids would use a trapper keeper. Say that slowly.
Right.
They're telling you right there. I mean, the faculty sounds like factory. If you read Alvin Toffler books, he talks about how schools are becoming industrial, machine shop or something, right? You're just putting the kids out one after another, but they're all the same.
I've shown pictures before of a school hallway with the lockers and stuff. And side by side, you look at a picture of a prison. And it's like, gosh, these look just so similar to each other. It's like your indoctrination is training.
It's getting even more like a prison when they are putting in the no guns on premises type things, a gun zone, and then they are bulletproofing a lot of things. So if a person came in with a gun, they could do more like a prison thing. Lock it down.
Yeah, and you never hear about anybody being prevented from coming in because they have a weapon or they're attempting to do something. No, those people, they let them right in. And then the police wait 40 minutes before they even attempt to do anything.
There was a story somewhere in Texas, I don't remember where, but the police knew there was a kid in the classroom with the kids, and the police officers got their kids out, but wouldn't do anything about the person with the gun in the classroom for over an hour or two.
Yep, that's absolutely true. And there's been multiple court rulings saying that the police do not have a duty to protect you. It's just true. I mean, their cars, I don't know if they still have it. I haven't noticed it, but I know growing up, they always had protect and serve on their cruisers. And people think that that's referring to the general public. They're not protecting and serving you. They're protecting and serving the people that write their paycheck. That's just common sense. Should be.
Yep, the trustees.
Yeah, right, exactly. That whole trust relationship all over again. You find that in every aspect of life. And somehow you always end up being the one screwed over, even if you think that you are Mr. Beneficiary. It's not the case. But
Well,
you know, yeah, that leads me to something else I've often thought about. You're talking about some of these different people, Shroud or Tucci or whoever, Divine, people talking about all these different processes or things like that. And it seems like everybody wants you to assume one of the positions in that trust. Why? Why do you have to assume any position in that trust? That's a construct created um, by the system who does not have a duty to protect you. So why would you want to hold any of their positions?
right. I mean, it's a simulated trust at best. There's no, I mean, nothing in that system was done right. Right. I never took an oath of office, or another person never became a trustee under the trusteeship doctrines or something. I mean, it's just all simulations, I think.
Yeah, well, that's actually kind of a perfect explanation of the constructive trust. And constructive trusts are what they do in courts. That's a constructive trust situation. Nobody's totally identified. It's just kind of presumed. I just kind of walk you into that spot.
Right. So it's like an incomplete trust then. It's just like a general idea, not a special idea. It doesn't, it's not really holding water though. I mean, legally, a lot of these wouldn't hold water, right? Like if you take a mortgage into court, I mean, they would never allow it because it was never done right. I mean, a foreclosure, I mean, the mortgage contract would be torn apart, right? I mean,
well, even the mortgage or the foreclosure, either of those are not performed correctly.
yeah.
I mean, all right. Yeah, let's look at that. Let's unpack that a little bit. An aspect of mortgages and foreclosures. When they foreclose on the home, what is the reason that they are taking that home away? What do they say?
Well, they'll say non-payment.
Non-payment. And they have the right to take that home away because of why? Not just because of non-payment, but because that home is what?
It's collateral.
Exactly. It's collateral. It's the surety for that loan. So let's go to the beginning. Let's go to the mortgage. You go and do the promissory note on a home, and you are agreeing for them to use that home or that land, whichever the case may be, as collateral for the money that they are loaning you, right?
Right.
Here's a question. At that time, they have not yet provided you the loan, have they?
Oh, no.
So, what right do you have to put up property that belongs to somebody else as collateral?
Okay, yeah, you don't really.
There's a big catch-22, isn't there?
Yeah. That's why they use the vague words like it's a mortgage agreement, right? Or an obligation. They never say you have to pay. It's just vague languages they use.
Well, it's the same exact thing with an automobile. You go and apply for a loan for an automobile, and that automobile is also collateral or surety for that loan. Well, you don't own that vehicle yet. So how are you able to go ahead and say, hey, I will give you this? It's not yours to give. You can't give it up as collateral because you don't own it.
Right.
There's actually an attorney I know of. He's out of prison now, but he served a number of years in prison because he was going and finding buyers for properties at his own personal listing price. All right.
Mhm.
And he would say, okay, you'd find the buyer, and say, for instance, he would set up the closing date to sign all the paperwork on Friday. All right. But what he would do first is on Monday, he would go and purchase that property from other sellers, the people who were originally selling it. And so, say, for instance, he would go and purchase a property for $100,000 on Monday, and he already had a sale already set up for later in the week for that same property. And he'd turn around and sell it for $120,000 5 days later. So, isn't that exactly what he was doing? You know, he was leveraging property that was not his own.
Right.
And he served time for it. He served, I'm sure it was federal time. All right. So, what's the difference between that and the purchase, or the mortgage, whether it's for the house or for an auto loan? It's
No.
basically the same exact situation. They're placing you in the position of putting something up for collateral or surety that you are not yet in possession of.
Right. Not the true title holder. Just this of title, or not even that. Sometimes it's just the grant deed, right?
Right. And this right here is exactly what you'd find if you go and look up the definition for the clean hands doctrine. The clean hands doctrine says that whatever action you are taking, you're not supposed to be set up to where you're going to personally benefit through something that was done illegally. But that's exactly what they have you in the position of, is not having clean hands when you're at that closing table.
Mm. Right.
I heard one court case where the defendant, we'll say, the respondent, told the judge, he said, that they're claiming that they loaned me, it was a foreclosure, says they're claiming that they're foreclosing because they loaned me $220,000 for this home. And his argument was, I never received $220,000. And the judge actually sat back and he was like, wow, so that's the first time I've ever heard anybody make that claim. But it's the truth.
Yep.
I mean, I went to a closing table and I purchased a home, and you sign paperwork saying that, you agree to repay the money given to you for the property, when actually you were never given any money to purchase a property.
Right. And it says it too, right? I mean, it doesn't say how much they lent you in exactly those words. Pretty sure they don't. Like, if, let's say you got $200,000, they're not going to say we lent you 200,000. I don't think they do.
And that amount is never shown as a negative amount either. It's always shown as a positive amount. Even if you receive your utility bill, in the mail, online, whatever, and it says, please pay this amount, or this is the amount charged, or whatever, it's never going to have a negative sign, a deficit sign for that amount. It's always shown in the positive.
Right.
So if this is truly a debt of yours, it should be shown in the negative.
Yeah, that's not even a true bill. It's just a statement, pretty much.
Well, exactly. Do they call it a bill? No, and that's what they call it. They call it a statement.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also misaddressed. I mean, it's the wrong, the wrong title, the wrong person. Who knows what else they're doing wrong? But see,
Right.
That's the question I have.
What's that, Joe?
So, Okay, so my question is, since they do statements and it's not technically a bill, how do you owe it? And if you don't owe it, how do you get away from paying it? Like, for instance, the electric bill and water bill, or is that something we don't need to discuss?
Well, that's an interesting topic too with the utilities, because I mean I've heard lots of claims put out there in regards to, like, say for instance, they fall under block grants where that money's already been afforded to the municipality or the county by the federal government, and so it's a double dip. That's one claim that I've heard regarding those.
Probably true, because everything's prepaid, where it's supposed to be since 1933.
Well, that's a claim that's made out there that I kind of have a little bit of difficulty with, because that's shown in HJR 192. It's not set up under PL 192, which would be Public Law 192. It's House Joint Resolution 192. So that means it came strictly out of the House of Representatives. This was a proposal made by them. It's not a law, it's just a proposal. It's a resolution. And whether that was really law or not, that's a good question. And
Okay,
so
I thought it did become public law, Brian. I mean, like later on in the century, no?
I've never seen it listed anywhere as public law. I've only
Okay.
ever seen it listed as HJR 192. And then there's a lot of people that get into the argument of, oh, and that was repealed and this and that. To me, it really doesn't matter, because it was just a resolution, which means it was basically just an idea brought forward. And nowhere in there do I find any reference to any debt being prepaid. I think there's bigger significance that you can find regarding that when you just research debt and government debt, because you're going to find many places where it's listed that all debts are debts of the government of the United States of America. It's their liabilities. They're all listed as liabilities of the government of the United States of America. So, is it truly your liability,
Right.
or theirs? I would say it's theirs.
Yeah, and especially if we have a social security number, we're definitely not liable. You know, that's the general fund. I think they're supposed to be, this is a militarized district now. It's, they're just addressing the estates. So we definitely, Brian, as the agent or authorized rep, are not liable, or not, whatever word it is.
Right. And that gets into the whole agent principal relationship, and whether or not the agent is acting outside of his boundaries or not.
Right. Which he might.
Yeah, I would say that's a strong possibility, isn't it?
Yeah, well, there's different positions though with that. I mean, you could be a withholding agent, you can be a transfer agent, when you write a personal check, customs agent, customs service agent, if you even handle the mail. They can get you for being different things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think they've got you trapped 7 ways to Sunday on so many of these things. I posted something several days ago that basically asked, what evidence do you have of citizenship? Because it seems like all of their most important forms, such as IRS or whatever, they've got a box to check that said, I am a U.S. citizen. Okay. So you check that box, yes. Well, if they ask you what evidence you have to prove that you are a U.S. citizen, what are you going to show them?
Right.
A lot of people will say birth certificate, but if you even go to vital statistics where they discuss this, they tell you flat out that the birth certificate is only evidence of citizenship. It is not used as proof of identification because there is no photo attached. So that means the birth certificate just proves that a citizen exists, but it doesn't do the required job of showing who that citizen is. Which to me, I think is pretty simple, that the citizen is not a who, but a what. And the what is that organization that was created with the same name when you're born.
Right. It's just a record.
Right. It's just a record.
Claim record, right?
Yeah. So that ends up essentially, if you just look at it in terms of it being basically a hat, a paper hat that you put on.
Right. Yeah, and they give you the state name, which could be like a transmitting utility, but none of that says you're a U.S. citizen or anything like that,
Yeah. And see, at one time they had actually a certificate of citizenship. You can look this up at the Department of State. And now they tell you, I don't know when they started doing this, but now on the site for that, they tell you, it's that not very many people were really requesting these. And so they quit doing it. And now, if you want one, they suggest that you go get a passport.
Yep. I did that.
So the passport stands in lieu of any claim of citizenship. And the passport, I mean, it may say the United States of America on it, but it's issued by the federal government. So it's a federal citizenship, not a state citizenship.
Right.
So, I mean, that puts you into, I don't know, another big question, especially when it comes, for instance, to the right to be a state citizen. Because you're going to find plenty of Supreme Court cases on that showing that, yeah, there is a difference between a state citizen and a federal citizen. But if you have no way of showing evidence of state citizenship, then what good is even a claim to that office to you? That claim is kind of a worthless claim if you can't back it with evidence.
Right.
And according to them, they say the only evidence they can provide to you is a passport. So this puts you into a whole kind of a circle jerk, doesn't it? Pardon the pun.
Well, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And they're the ringmasters.
Well, and to me, they've actually made it easy on everybody with the way that they formulated this and the direction they wanted to head in. Because the direction they really want to head in is eventually just having everything be digital. And we're right at the cusp of that today. It's just about nobody gets a paper paycheck anymore. It all goes directly back to the Federal Reserve, back to one of their banks, without ever passing through your hands, even though your hands were the ones that did the labor. Now they're making everything completely digital. So, remove the digital footprint.
Right. Which is what they like,
I still get paper checks.
Yeah, I recommend everybody stick with that at least for as long as possible. Because you can
I don't
deposit
want the
that.
bank getting paid for what I do.
Yeah, yeah. Why should the bank be getting paid before you do? You're the one that has to clock in, not them. Oh, I thought I heard a lady in the background trying to pipe in. I don't know if she's still there. But eventually this is going to happen really with all forms of payment. Everything's just going to be a card. And with a card, that means whoever is in control of the system that keeps track of whatever is on cards can just push a button and turn off your accessibility. And that's
Right.
a danger everybody's looking at. I mean, there's been theories for a long time that we're living in nothing but a hologram or a holographic universe, which means that there's somebody at the controls. But that's, whether you agree with that theory or not, that's what they're really turning everything into. They're turning everything, every aspect of life into a hologram that they can just push a button and turn off accessibility. Changes your ability to be even a character in that hologram.
Yeah, because if there's nothing true and real, that's just more into their world.
Yep.
More simulations, more fiction.
Yep. Now, I will say, I mean, there's something I've been looking into for a while. I haven't really come out with it yet. But I was never a fan of the belief of this being a holographic universe or a hologram. But I think the problem is with what our concept of what a hologram is. Because we only see things through the lens or education or whatever, the age that we're provided with or the time that we're living in. I am really starting to lean towards the possibility that things are, though, more of a simulation. Whether this really means that there is somebody at a control switch or not, though, I'm questioning that. I don't think there is. So if you can picture a simulation without, a mad scientist behind it, that's kind of what I'm looking at and kind of believing today. And that is that the simulation runs itself. And this would fall under the idea of karma, for instance, is that, and that karma originally is intended to mean that, if you do something bad in this lifetime, that when you come back on the next lifetime, you might come back as a gopher or a snake or something like that. But I'm looking at it from the aspect that in karma that it deals with you in real time. So if you are, say, somebody that you drink a lot, you do a lot of drugs, you do B&Es and people's vehicles or their property, and rob purses from old ladies. If that's the kind of lifestyle you live, then yes, you're setting yourself up for danger to be imposed on you because you're putting yourself in dangerous situations. Now, looking at things from that aspect with a simulation, you consider that activities on the whole, as they occur, are going to lead towards other activities occurring. I think, for instance, of the domino effect. All right. And that within this simulation, there's boundaries, there's barriers. So at some point during that simulation, things just kind of revert back and rotate around and start over again. And I think of the quote from Mark Twain where he said that history doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme. And I think he was really hitting on something right there in regards to this being a possible simulation. In that mankind's behavior is very predictable, and it's eventually going to lead to a certain point where it is going to incur something that's not necessarily all that positive, whether you want to call it a destruction or whatever you want to call it. But though, with every death of one thing also means the rebirth of something else. And then so the simulation just kind of starts over and keeps going. I don't know if I explained that very well, but that's kind of what I'm looking at recently. Because
Well, Twain said, "In my life, I've known a great many troubles. Most of them never happened." Simulation?
what's that? Yeah, simulation.
Yeah, he was hinting towards his own life. He said, "I've known a great many troubles, but most of them never happened." One of his, better quotes that I have.
Yeah.
I mean, just
And
look around. I mean, it's just the simulations are everywhere. I mean, the legal system. There's one right there for you. Right? That's a simulation.
right. Well,
You know?
that's a simulated legal process, is what I would call it.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
even your doctors. I mean, most of them anyway. I mean, I know they're nice people, but it still is some type of a simulation of health, or but no strike against them personally.
Well, I would say this simulation of life, though, there's a reason why mankind doesn't really exceed 120 years. And I think that's because if men did live longer, and when I say men, I mean women too, nobody get triggered. But if mankind did live longer, then they'd start seeing the pattern to the simulation.
Hmm. Right.
And at the same time, that would be the reason why history is only written by the victors. You only see one side of the story, which eventually, at some point in life, you come to the realization that there is two sides to every story, and then there's the truth, laying somewhere in between.
Or there's the truth, and then everything else. How about that one?
Right. And I think even with some history that we can verify to some extent, we can start looking at the repetition of the simulation with, say, different world events that have occurred. Look, for instance, at the assassination of JFK and of Abraham Lincoln, and look at the similarities that were involved there. To me, that is a really good pointer towards the simulation. Um, Kennedy was killed in a Ford, and so was Abraham Lincoln. He was at Ford's Theater. Both of them had problems with the Federal Reserve and wanted to create their own way of financing things. There's just so many things that connect between Kennedy and Lincoln that, like, wow. I mean, it's impossible for these things to have actually been planned that way. So it really does kind of start to point towards a simulation.
So
Right.
who's the simulator?
Yeah, the simulation or the simulator.
Who is it though?
Well, that's the question. That's a big part of the question.
But you think he's dumb enough to let us figure it out? Whether it's a he or a she, doesn't matter.
I think when people figure it out, and I'm not just saying like you figure it out or I figure it out or somebody else. I think it's when the collective, everybody for the most part, figures it out, that becomes the end of the simulation. Well, that's when you're going to see game over appear on the screen. And people, their own true will is really going to become more available to them. I had Jordan Maxwell on a few years ago on this podcast, and Jordan Maxwell was talking about something that happened in his life when he was younger, and that he was kind of introduced to someone, and this individual who he didn't know, he was living somewhere else other than even the state that he grew up in. This individual sat down and told him about his childhood and told him about details in his childhood that nobody other than Jordan Maxwell would have known. And then told him about some things that were going to happen to Jordan Maxwell in the future and about certain people that he was going to meet and things like that. And so, Jordan was basically expressing at that time, he's like, how much control do we have? How much of our self-determination really does exist? Is everything already pre-planned? And whether we know it or not, well, we are just walking through the steps that will lead us to what was ultimately already prescribed for your life.
Say what?
So a situation like that makes you stop and wonder, do you really have self-determination, or are things already pre-planned for you without your control of it?
Great question.
So I would say that there's a lot of things in our life, like I said, people being very predictable. You look at a lot of people's lives and you can pretty well, if you know them, lay out what their whole week is going to be like. Little details you may not know, but you're pretty much going to know what their whole future week is going to be. Is what time their alarm clock goes off every day. You know what time they arrive to work. You know what they generally do after work. On Tuesdays they go to the gym. Wednesday nights they go to a poker game with friends. Things like that. Things that are laid out, set in stone, that they don't feel like it's set in stone, but they've been doing the same exact routine week after week after week. And I think one of the things people can do to maybe break the simulation of their life is change up their routines. And that's going to throw a monkey wrench in the system of the simulation, because that's going to open opportunities for new things, maybe meet new contacts or just have different events occur to your life that would not have regularly occurred if you were doing that same cookie cutter lifestyle that you've been doing for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I do as well. And I can verify one thing to you that does occur by living a lifestyle that way is that it does expose the plasticity of your brain, the malleability of your brain, and the way you think. Because your brain isn't following the same exact little routine all the time. So now it's having new thoughts, new ideas, new possibilities plugged into your life and into your mind. And so it does have a change on how your brain operates and how your brain thinks. I've just seen so many examples of that. It's numerous. Go back to when we're talking about schooling. In school, one of my worst topics was math. I couldn't stand math, did not like math at all. And I think the reason why was because of the way that it was presented. I think it could have been presented better. And I might have looked at it differently.
Right.
But then what did I end up doing in life? I ended up going and doing casino work, which means you're doing nothing but math repetitiously over and over and over for generally 40 segments of time every hour.
How do people usually cheat in casinos?
Oh, there's a lot of different ways. It depends on what game you're talking about. There's numerous ways of cheating. And the reason there's a reason why, if you're in the business, you'd notice whether, say, you work in Nevada, or you go to Atlantic City and work, or go to Indian reservations and work, that most generally the procedure for any game, whether you're dealing blackjack, roulette, dice, even if you're a slot tech, procedure is generally always exactly the same thing over and over again. And the reason why they have your procedure on a game be identical is because when something enters the mix that is a little different, a alarm will go off in your head. You're basically taught that if something feels wrong, the reason why is because something is wrong. You need to stop and retrace things and see what's occurring.
Don't disturb the flow, huh?
Right. A good example for that, for instance, would be a teller at a bank. A teller at the bank is more likely to identify counterfeit money than anybody else is. And the reason why is because their procedure, their routine. Their routine is handling the real McCoy, even though it's fake money. We'll just call it real. They're used to handling the same money all day, every day. So the second counterfeit passes through their hands, a little alarm bell goes off in their head. Ooh, something's wrong here. And they got to stop. What's wrong? What is my mind identifying that I'm not necessarily seeing with my eyes? And the same thing happens in gaming. I'll tell you what, I would say a very high percentage of people cheating or stealing in gaming is not observed. It's normally heard. You normally hear it happen because your mind is used to the same sounds occurring over and over throughout, whatever the procedure of the particular game may be. So when something different occurs, normally your ears are the first thing to catch it. Your eyes have to be focused on whatever's going on in order to catch it, whereas your ears don't. Your ears are pulling in all of the audio information that is presented with.
Yeah, 360. Your eyes are only 180.
Yeah, exactly.
And regarding math, what is the most math concept that, no matter how smart someone is, always gets caught cheating through that math concept or mathematical concept? That something in the calculation doesn't seem right, and there's one mathematical concept that always is the reason that the smartest cheaters get caught.
Well, I'll give you a really good example of it, and something that I've witnessed firsthand numerous times. And I'll go, for instance, and this can be used for any game, but I remember this happening specifically with roulette. That whenever a high payout is being pushed to a player, depending on procedure, but most places will require the croupier or the dealer to call out the amount being pushed. Okay, and there was a supervisor referred to as a floor person in gaming. One time, a amount was called out, and he turned around and said, "Stop," because he knew there was no such number for a payout in roulette. I'll give you a simple example. Roulette, if you hit a number straight up, it pays 35 to 1. And if you have $2 on it, of course, then it's going to pay $70. You know, if you have $3 on it, it's going to pay $105.
Right, and so on.
So, right. So if a croupier or dealer was to call out pushing 104, a good supervisor would know, oh, there's a problem here. There's
Right.
no such payment as a 104. Now, roulette can get more convoluted, really, because there's multiple payouts in roulette. You're going to have 11 to 1 payout, 17 to 1 payout, 8 to 1 payouts. And however a particular color for a player has that number covered, can be a combination of many of those. But eventually you get used to a certain set of numbers that you always hear. So when you hear an odd number, you know there's something wrong. So mathematically, that would be one aspect of it.
So basically, not fitting the sequence is the thing that the reason most smart cheaters get caught.
Right. Right. Well, and I can't say which method they most often get caught by, but sequence is one of the big telltale signs that there's something wrong.
And is that how like the FBI or CIA usually find that something is fishy? It doesn't fit the normal sequence of events?
Right. Right. Yeah, they use the same thing. They follow patterns and sequence. I mean, patterns and it's referred to as shadows and types, also. So you watch for particular shadows and types, and when you find something that doesn't fit the mold, then that's telling you, a little alarm bell goes off in your head. There's something wrong here. But this is also, though, a system that they even use themselves. If you look up, for instance, different methods that, well, I won't name the agency, that an agency might use to topple a government, for instance, that they use that themselves. And that is a change of sequence, which is causing confusion in someone's mind. And that confusion, done on a mass scale, causes a destabilization of a society. And so when you've got total destabilization occurring within a society, that society is much more easily molded or moved or controlled. It actually is probably a better word for it.
Are you talking about COVID?
That's one example of a destabilization action. And these destabilization actions can even be used at more of a personal or individual level as well. I saw a good example of that several days ago. There's a store that I go to where there is a girl who is a cashier that wears a SEG button on her uniform. And a SEG button, people can look it up, it refers to a certain movement, okay? And she's got another button that she wears as well. And that other button has all of her pronouns listed on it. All right. And those pronouns, I will say, are not her, she, or miss, okay? Those aren't listed.
What is it, Z-Zer?
Beg your pardon?
Is it Z-Zer?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. It's the one button, like I said, was a SEG button, SEG, and the other one lists the pronouns that she likes to be referred to by. Okay, so the destabilization in her situation was that whenever I make a payment to her for a product and leave, she always says, "Have a good evening, sir." Well, she's automatically using a pronoun for me that is not in the list of pronouns that she would use for herself. She wouldn't use Miss or Mrs. or Sir regarding what she believes in, but though her subconscious automatically kicks in and says, "Have a good evening, sir," when I leave. So that shows now that her subconscious does not agree with what her conscious opinion is by the button that she has on her shirt. Right. So Now there's a cognitive dissonance going on. Now, her subconscious isn't agreeing with her conscious choice. And so there's a confusion automatically going on there within her mind, and that she more than likely does not even realize at all. She does feel that there's something wrong, but she's pointing on her conscious level more at an incorrect pronoun being used in reference to herself. So, and that's being done on a personal or individual level to a lot of young people, but it's being, like I said, done on a mass scale as well. So that's going to affect the collective conscious of many younger people. I recommend people go and look up. Wow, her name's just going to jump out of my head now. She's a North Korean immigrant. Lives in the USA now.
I think I know who she is. The girl that escaped from North Korea.
Right.
Yeah, I think she went to Canada, then came to the U.S. I know what you're talking about, but
Yomi Parks is her name. Yomi Parks did a video a few months ago where she was basically escorting the African American public and saying, "Don't you guys realize one of the very first things that happened in North Korea was the changing of pronouns, and that North Korea doesn't even have a personal pronoun. It's not even available in their language. There is no word for I or for me or myself. Those don't exist. Everything is we, us, them, ourselves.
That can't be real.
They're all collective. They don't have any personal pronouns in their language."
And is that how they become tyrannical? They first plant it in their heads, and then they do it physically.
Yeah. The first thing, the one thing that's always been the objective all through history has been the control of the mind, the control of the minds of men. It's always been the number one goal. Because if you can control the minds of men, you can control the collective.
That's the literal meaning of the word government.
Yeah, absolutely. To govern the mind. Ment is mind, and govern is self-explanatory. Yeah, that's a definition in and of itself.
Well, it's interesting that she said the North Koreans started with eliminating the pronouns.
Right. Yeah, which shows that they started right out with a destabilization of the individual. And what's the saying? It's not the method of what's done; it's the end result. Whether it's going to be good for the collective. That's really the only thing that matters. And I remember first seeing, gosh, what was it? Probably 15 years ago or more. You see stickers on people's cars that say, "My child is a graduate of Pine Hill West," or "My child is a proud middle schooler at Eastside School," things like that.
Yeah.
And I started seeing these stickers that said, "My child is a world citizen at such and such a school." So it's taken everybody away from the personal and the individual and just putting them into the collective. That it is the good of the collective takes over more power than what is good for the personal individual or for the man or woman.
But it's meaningless, though, the global citizen thing. What is that even supposed to mean? You can't go to all countries. Just
right.
Symbolic for saying, "Oh, we're all one," and that.
Yeah, and so that's putting something divisive inside the subconscious of people. Their subconscious realizes the truth and says, man, there's something that ain't quite right here. So that's already making you mentally destabilized in an area. If they multiply, destabilize you in many areas of your mind, uh, gosh, how are you able to stand on anything or believe in anything or have true knowledge of anything if your mind is constantly arguing with itself?
Is that similar to the it takes a whole village concept?
Yeah, the village concept. Yeah. I mean, as far as like when Hillary said it takes a village to raise a child. I mean, there was even a movie put out. I think it was called The Village. People that lived in the woods that didn't realize that anything else existed in the world, and they were told, "Oh, be afraid of the woods. There's monsters out there." It's mind control.
Well, I think there's. You heard of the North Sentinel Island in India?
In regards to what?
Hmm.
In regards to what?
That's where the most isolated people in the world live. The most primitive people. They don't know jack shit about what we're doing.
Well, that's one of the things that Yomi Parks also says about North Korea. That growing up, they knew of the existence of the United States, which was an evil empire. They knew of the existence that there was a China, but that they really didn't know anything about any of the nations around them. They didn't have any solid information. All they knew is what they were told by, their leader. But no, it wouldn't surprise me that there would be areas like that where people maybe live on an island and have absolutely zero clue of the existence of anything else.
They're just starting to learn how to start fires, to use fire for like cooking or warmth.
Wow, that's interesting. Where'd you
Yes,
say that's at?
it's called North Sentinel Island. It's an Indian island, but they're not trying to apply any laws there because I think that kind of people don't have a conception of what law is. So they live their primitive life, like they're liking it. They tried to integrate them and they refused. There was, I think, a pastor in 2018 who tried. He went from the U.S. He's Asian, but he was born and raised in the U.S. He tried to go to them and give them the message of the Lord and Savior Jesus and all that, and they shot him with an arrow, and he's dead now.
I did hear about that situation. I didn't know where it occurred at, but yeah, I did hear
Yeah.
about that situation.
So it's called North Sentinel Island. I'll write the name on the chat.
All right. Yeah, I'll go look that up. But and that'd be a good example of, say, different resets that have happened over time. People today, you hear reset, and people look at a bigger picture. You know what I mean? Because we have more of maybe a world view or something like that. Whereas, for many, many years, only until, recent history, people didn't have a whole lot of knowledge or information about what was going on other continents or things like that. So, there could have been localized resets that happened, where maybe just a handful of people survived, and who knows what intelligent level those survivors were at, and maybe they had to reinvent the wheel again and learn how to produce fire again and things like that. And I have no doubt that things like that have happened over time.
So does that kind of go along with the whole Great Reset concept that they're talking about?
Yeah, it kind of goes along with it, but the Great Reset really that is being talked about, like if you're looking at like um, WHO or some of these other organizations, uh, the Great Reset they're looking at is something that's created and contrived and controlled by man, whereas some of these other resets, like what I'm referring to, are things that were caused maybe by nature, by maybe sunspots, flooding, different world calamities that happen to localized areas or to certain continents that were maybe facing the sun or whatever the case might have been at the time. I think there's natural resets, and then there's this one, which is a man-made reset.
That's probably why sun worship is all over the earth.
Yeah, sun worship can be found everywhere.
Even the Romans did it. So it must have been serious.
The Romans did it. The Egyptians did it. I mean, and that's where the Romans got it from. They got it from the Egyptians. But whenever you go in and you conquer a people, you're going to pick up some of the residual beliefs or the residual concepts from those people as well and incorporate them into, whether it's your worship or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
They found, like, say, the disappearance of the Mayans, that they found evidence for the Mayans even here in Florida. And if you look around on different areas of Florida and you dig up possible structures that weren't necessarily identified, that they're starting to identify that it was Mayans due to like a very unique type of pottery that they would produce, things like that.
In Florida, they found.
Yep.
Maybe those are like some Mayans did not like the draconian policies, so they moved to Florida. You know.
Yeah, it's a possible. There could have been a migration of some of them that came this direction. Or that, there was something bad that happened in their culture that eliminated a lot of them, and some of them got out, some of them escaped, some of them could have come here. There's a lot of possibilities to that. All right, guys. Let's see. Well, we've been here for an hour and a half or so. Let's wrap this up. It was just a chance, opportunity for everybody to kind of chit chat, different group members. That's what these calls were originally intended for, because it's kind of hard to find like-minded people you can exchange ideas and concepts with. Most certainly, anybody's next door neighbor isn't really on board. They're still kind of stuck in the mental bondage. And so there's not very many people you have to chit chat with these kind of things about. So, like I said, that was the original intention of this group, and good little chat tonight, I think. Thanks for being here, guys.
All right, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
See you all later. Have a wonderful week, and make the best of it. Make the best of it you can, and try employing some of the ideas that I brought out tonight. Change up your life patterns. Don't be doing the same thing every single day. Even though you may have to go to work at the same time, through whatever days of the week you work on. Instead, change those up by using different patterns of going to work and coming home. Don't go into from work the same exact pattern that you do all these other days. Change it up every day. Take a different path to work, even if it's half a mile longer or something like that. Just start making little changes like that in your life, and notice some of the things that start changing mentally with you as well, because I guarantee it does happen. Good night, guys.
Have a good week.
See y'all.